The Great Council Chamber of the Galactic Senate hummed with the low murmur of 1,000 different species, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, chirps, telepathic whispers, and harmonic vibrations. High above the assembly floor, holographic displays showed star charts and fleet movements across 17 contested systems. The war against the hegemony had been raging for 3 standard years, and every species in the Alliance was feeling the strain. Ambassador Sarah Chun stepped forward to the speaking platform, her simple blue diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by most other representatives. The human delegation was small compared to the massive Krillian contingent or the floating biopods of the Aquarian Collective, but Chun carried herself with the quiet dignity that had become synonymous with her species since they joined the galactic community. Honored delegates, Chun began, her voice carried by the translation network to every corner of the vast chamber. Humanity requests authorization to implement our ghost protocols on all contested battlefields, beginning with the Valheim system. A ripple of what could only be described as amusement passed through the assembly. The Zephyrian delegate, a tall crystalline being whose thoughts sparkled visibly around his translucent head, allowed his mental laughter to broadcast openly. His name was Keth Moore, and his species had mastered telepathy when humans were still discovering fire. Ghost protocols? Keth Moore's thoughts echoed in the chamber, his mental voice dripping with condescension. The primitive humans wished to commune with their deceased warriors? Perhaps next they will request permission to read intrals for battle strategy. The Thraxian representative, a massive insectoid creature with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's light in kaleidoscopic patterns, clicked his mandibles in agreement. The Thraxian hive mind finds this quaint. Do humans truly believe the dead can provide tactical advantage? Our collective consciousness encompasses all living Thraxians. We have no need for such superstition. Chun remained calm, though her jaw tightened slightly. She had expected this reaction. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for only 50 years, and their customs still seemed strange to species that had been traveling the stars for millennia. The protocols are not superstition, Chun replied evenly. They are a communication system designed to honor our fallen while maintaining unit cohesion and morale. Human soldiers fight better when they feel connected to those who came before them. This statement caused an even greater stir among the delegates. The Veltar representative, a slug-like creature whose entire body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, expressed disbelief through rapid color changes that the translation system rendered as scoffing laughter. Connected to the dead, the Veltar delegate pulsed. The Veltar shed our bodies like old shells. Death is simply a transition to a new form of existence. Only the most backward species cling to the illusion that consciousness persists after biological cessation. Admiral Vexhai of the Quran military floated in his gravity control harness, his 4 arms gesturing dismissively. The Qurans were renowned throughout the galaxy for their tactical brilliance and had never lost a war. Humans, he said in his deep, resonant voice, your species shows promise in conventional warfare, but this obsession with death holds you back. The Quran way is to focus on victory through superior strategy and technology. The dead serve no purpose in battle except as lessons learned. Chun looked around the chamber, seeing the same expression of amused condescension on every alien face. Even their allies seemed embarrassed by humanity's request. The Centaurian delegate, whose people had been among the first to welcome humans into the galactic community, avoided eye contact. The ghost protocols, Chun continued, her voice growing stronger, are an integral part of human military doctrine. We're not asking for your understanding, only for permission to implement them in combat zones where human forces are engaged. Kethmore's crystalline form shimmered as his amusement intensified. Very well. His thoughts broadcast with theatrical grandeur. Let the humans play with their imaginary dead friends. Perhaps when they face the reality of hegemony warfare, they will abandon such childish beliefs. The vote was swift and dismissive. The Ghost protocols were approved with the same casual indifference one might show when allowing a child to bring a favorite toy to a serious meeting. Most delegates had already moved on to other matters in their minds, viewing the human request as barely worth their attention. As the session moved to the next item on the agenda, Chen remained standing for a moment longer, feeling the weight of their collective dismissal. She thought of the men and women already fighting and dying on Valheim, outnumbered 10-1 by hegemony forces. They had requested the Ghost protocols not out of superstition, but out of desperation. Every advantage, no matter how small, might mean the difference between survival and extinction. The war on Valheim had been particularly brutal. The planet sat at a crucial hyperspace junction that controlled access to 3 major trade routes. Whoever held Valheim could effectively cut off supply lines to entire sectors. The hegemony had committed massive resources to taking it, and the human colonial forces found themselves facing impossible odds. Colonel Marcus Torres, the ranking human officer on Valheim, had sent the request for Ghost protocols directly to Earth Command with a simple message attached. We need every edge we can get. The boys want to honor the fallen, and if it keeps them fighting harder, I'm all for it. Earth Command had agreed immediately. Humanity had learned long ago that soldiers who fought for more than just orders fought better than those who didn't. The Ghost protocols weren't just about communication systems or morale boosters. They were about maintaining the bonds that held human units together, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. But the galactic community saw only primitive superstition. They couldn't understand that humans had always carried their dead with them in a battle, not as burden, but as strength. Every human soldier who fell became part of the story that drove their comrades forward. Their names were spoken before battles, their sacrifices remembered in quiet moments between firefights. Chen finally stepped down from the platform, knowing that the real test would come on Valheim itself. The other species could mock human customs all they wanted, but soon they would see what happened when humanity was pushed to its breaking point with only their faith in each other to sustain them. In the depths of space, the hegemony fleet was already moving toward Valheim, confident that their superior numbers and technology would crush the human defenders. They had studied human tactics, analyzed their weapons, and calculated the odds. What they couldn't calculate was the strength of bonds that death could not break. The Ghost protocols were about to be tested in the crucible of real warfare, and the galaxy was about to learn that some things existed beyond the comprehension of even the most advanced civilizations. The humans were preparing to show their alien allies something that no amount of technology or telepathy could replicate: the power of memory, love, and the refusal to let death have the final word. As Chun left the council chamber, she touched the small memorial pin on her uniform collar. It bore the names of 17 human soldiers who had already died defending Valheim. Soon, those names would be entered into the Ghost protocols, and their memories would become part of something larger than any individual life. The aliens thought they were watching humans cling to primitive beliefs. They had no idea they were about to witness the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. The morning sun cast long shadows across the scarred landscape of Valheim's northern continent as Sergeant Elena Vasquez crouched behind the twisted remains of what had once been a communications tower. The metallic smell of ozone from plasma weapons hung heavy in the air, mixed with the acrid smoke of burning structures. 3 days had passed since the hegemony forces launched their latest offensive, and the human defenders were barely holding their ground. Vasquez wiped the sweat from her forehead and checked her rifle's power cell. Around her, the remnants of Bravo Company huddled in whatever cover they could find. What had started as a full company of 200 soldiers was now down to 37 exhausted fighters. The hegemony didn't just outnumber them. They outgunned them with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. "Sergeant," whispered Private Kim, a young woman whose uniform was torn and stained with mud and worse things. "The Ghost protocols are showing green across the board." Vasquez glanced at the small device mounted on her forearm. The Ghost Protocol terminal looked like nothing more than a simple communication array, but according to the technicians back at base, it was tuned to frequencies that somehow resonated with human neural patterns. The science was beyond her, but orders were orders, and if it helped maintain unit cohesion, she was willing to try anything. Roger that, Kim. Everyone else check your terminals. Command wants full implementation as of 0600 hours. The soldiers around her fumbled with their own devices, most looking skeptical. Corporal Davies, a veteran of the Titan Colony Wars, shook his head as he activated his unit. Still can't believe we're supposed to talk to dead people, Davies muttered. What's next? Reading tea leaves for enemy positions. Before Vasquez could respond, the sharp whine of hegemony hover tanks filled the air. The distinctive sound made every human in the company freeze. Those tanks had been responsible for some of their worst losses over the past few days. Their energy shields could deflect most human weapons, and their plasma cannons could level buildings with single shots. "Contact front," shouted Private Martinez from his position near the road. 3 hover tanks, infantry support, moving fast on our position. Vasquez felt her heart sink. 3 tanks meant at least 60 hegemony soldiers, and her people were in no condition for a prolonged firefight. She raised her rifle and was about to order a fighting withdrawal when something strange happened. Her Ghost Protocol terminal began emitting a soft, pulsing light that she had never seen before. The device had been active for months without doing anything unusual, but now it seemed almost alive. The light grew brighter, and she heard what sounded like static resolving into something that might have been a voice. Elena. The word was barely audible, distorted by interference, but unmistakably human. Elena, it's Marcus. Vasquez nearly dropped her weapon. Marcus was Captain Marcus Reed, her former commanding officer who had died 2 weeks ago when a hegemony orbital strike leveled the eastern defensive line. She had seen his body herself, had helped carry it to the makeshift cemetery behind the base. "This is some kind of malfunction," she whispered, but even as she said it, the voice became clearer. "No malfunction, Sergeant. The tanks, there's a weakness. The rear armor joint, where the hover generators connect. Hit them there." The voice was definitely Marcus, with the same slight accent he'd picked up during his years on the frontier colonies. But that was impossible. Dead people didn't give tactical advice through communication equipment. Around her, other soldiers were staring at their own terminals with expressions of shock and confusion. Private Kim was pale as a ghost herself, tears streaming down her face as she whispered to her device. "Sarah." Kim's voice was barely audible. "Sarah, is that really you?" The approaching hover tanks were close enough now that Vasquez could see the angular forms of hegemony soldiers jogging alongside them. In moments, they would be in range to open fire. She had to make a decision. "Davies," she shouted, "you still have that armor-piercing round for the rocket launcher?" "Yeah, but Sarge, those tanks have shields." "AP round won't." "Shut up and listen. Target the rear of the lead tank, where the hover generators mount to the main body. Trust me on this." Davies looked at her like she'd lost her mind, but years of military training kicked in. He shouldered the launcher and sighted on the specified location. The tank shields were already charging, creating a shimmering barrier around the vehicle that should deflect anything the humans could throw at it. The rocket streaked across the battlefield and struck exactly where Vasquez had indicated. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the entire rear section of the hover tank exploded in a brilliant flash of light and debris. The massive vehicle crashed to the ground, its hover systems completely disabled. "Holy hell," Davies breathed. "How did you know that would work?" Before Vasquez could answer, more voices began coming through the Ghost Protocol terminals. Dead soldiers were speaking to living ones, providing information that no living person should have known. Sergeant Williams, killed in action 4 days ago, warned Private Chun about a sniper's nest in the ruins to their left. Lieutenant Foster, who died in the orbital bombardment, gave coordinates for a weapons cache that his squad had hidden before their final battle. The second hover tank fired its main cannon at their position, but the humans were already moving. They had been warned exactly where the shot would land by voices that shouldn't exist. The blast crater appeared precisely where Bravo Company had been moments before. "This is insane," muttered Corporal Davies as he reloaded the rocket launcher. "Dead people don't give tactical advice." "Then, explain how he knew about that weakness," Vasquez replied, her own voice shaking. Through her earpiece, Captain Reed's voice continued providing updates on enemy positions, movement patterns, and vulnerable points in their equipment. The Hegemony infantry had taken cover when their lead tank was destroyed, but they were advancing steadily. These weren't the typical Hegemony conscripts that made up most of their army. These were elite shock troopers, veterans of dozens of campaigns across the galaxy. Their black armor could withstand most small arms fire, and their weapons could cut through human cover like paper. "Elena," came Reed's voice again, clearer now than it had been since the phenomenon started. "Remember the training exercise on Kepler Station? The one where we had to defend the communications array?" Vasquez did remember. It had been 3 years ago, and Reed had taught them a tactic for dealing with superior numbers in urban terrain. But how could he know they needed that specific knowledge now? "All units, listen up," she called over the comm channel. "We're going to implement the Kepler Station defense. Davies and Martinez, you take the high ground in that building to our right. Kim and Thompson flank left through the rubble field. Everyone else, staged withdrawal through the access tunnels." Just like the exercise, it was a desperate plan that required perfect timing and a lot of luck. Under normal circumstances, she never would have attempted it with such a small force. But the voices were providing real-time intelligence that made the impossible seem achievable. As her soldiers moved into position, Vasquez realized that every single one of them was receiving guidance from their Ghost Protocol terminals. The devices were functioning far beyond their design parameters, transmitting information that defied every scientific principle she knew. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded military history. Human soldiers moved with uncanny precision, always seeming to know exactly where the enemy would be and what they would do next. They avoided ambushes that hadn't been set yet, and struck at weaknesses that should have been impossible to detect. When the fighting was over, 37 human soldiers had defeated a force of 60 elite Hegemony shock troopers and destroyed 3 hover tanks. The enemy survivors retreated in confusion, unable to explain how they had been outmaneuvered so completely. Vasquez stood among the smoking ruins, staring at her Ghost Protocol terminal. The device had returned to its normal state, showing only standard communication functions. But she could swear she heard a faint whisper, barely audible above the wind. "Well done, Elena. We're proud of you." She looked around at her surviving soldiers. Every one of them had the same expression of stunned disbelief, mixed with something that might have been hope. They had witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about life, death, and the nature of existence itself. Word of the impossible victory spread quickly through the human command structure on Valheim. Other units reported similar phenomena: dead soldiers appearing on battlefields, providing tactical advice, and somehow interfering with enemy equipment in ways that couldn't be explained or detected by conventional sensors. The Hegemony High Command dismissed the reports as propaganda or psychological warfare. Dead beings couldn't influence physical reality. It was scientifically impossible. But deep in the command centers of a dozen different alien species, military analysts were beginning to study the battle recordings from Valheim with growing unease. Something was happening on human battlefields that fell far outside their understanding of warfare, technology, and the fundamental laws of physics. The humans had always been considered brave, but primitive fighters. Now, they seemed to be demonstrating capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. And if the reports were true, they weren't just fighting with the living anymore. They were fighting with an army of ghosts. The emergency session of the Galactic Security Council convened in the early hours of what would later be known as the Night of Impossible Reports. Representatives from 18 different species had demanded immediate consultation after receiving battlefield reports that defied every known law of physics, biology, and military science. Commander Yilseth of the Arcturian Observation Corps stood before the assembled delegates, his crystalline neural tendrils flickering with patterns that indicated extreme agitation. The Arcturians have been monitoring the Valheim conflict for the past month using their most advanced sensor arrays, capable of detecting quantum fluctuations and dimensional anomalies across vast distances. Honored delegates, Yilseth began, his voice resonating with harmonic overtones that conveyed deep uncertainty. What we have observed on the human battlefields of Valheim challenges our fundamental understanding of reality itself. The holographic displays around the chamber lit up with tactical recordings from the past 2 weeks. The images showed human soldiers in desperate battles against overwhelming hegemony forces, but there were anomalies in every recording that made the assembled aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. At precisely 1407 hours, local time, Bravo Company of the Human Colonial Marines engaged 3 hegemony hover tanks in Sector 7. Yilseth continued. Our sensors detected 37 human life signs and approximately 60 hegemony soldiers. Standard tactical analysis indicated a 97% probability of human defeat within 6 minutes. The display showed the battle from multiple angles, recorded by orbital observation platforms that could track individual heartbeats from space. The delegates watched as the hopelessly outnumbered human force not only survived, but achieved complete victory in what should have been a massacre. Notice the movement patterns, Yilseth pointed out. Human soldiers consistently avoid enemy fire before weapons are discharged. They target specific weak points in hegemony equipment that are not visible to standard sensors. They coordinate attacks with precision that suggests real-time intelligence from sources we cannot detect. Ambassador Keth Moore of the Zephyrians leaned forward, his crystalline form shimmering with skepticism. Impressive tactical performance, certainly, but hardly supernatural. Perhaps the humans have developed new communication technologies or sensor arrays. That was our initial hypothesis, Yilseth replied, his tendrils darkening to a deep blue that indicated grim certainty. However, we also detected these. The holographic display shifted to show enhanced imagery of the same battlefield. Ghostly, translucent figures moved among the human soldiers, their forms barely visible even with the most advanced enhancement algorithms. They appeared to be humanoid, wearing what looked like military uniforms, but they registered no life signs and cast no shadows. These entities appear during every major engagement. Our sensors detect no mass, no energy signature, no quantum disruption that would indicate any known form of technology. Yet they seem to interact with both the environment and the human soldiers in meaningful ways. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations and rapid-fire conversations in dozens of languages. Admiral Vexhai of the Quran military force activated his translation matrix to address the assembly. This must be some form of holographic projection or optical illusion, he declared, his 4 arms gesturing dismissively. The humans are clearly using advanced psychological warfare techniques to confuse their enemies and boost their own morale. We consider that possibility, Yilseth responded. However, these recordings were taken by hegemony forces themselves. The display switched to show combat footage from hegemony helmet cameras and vehicle sensors. The same ghostly figures appeared in the enemy recordings, moving through solid objects and seeming to whisper in the ears of human soldiers. In several instances, the translucent figures appeared to directly interfere with hegemony equipment, causing weapons to misfire and communications to fail at crucial moments. General Thakmore of the Hegemony Military Command had been granted permission to address the Council despite the ongoing conflict. His reptilian features displayed obvious distress as he spoke through the translation network. My forces have encountered these phenomena on every battlefield where human resistance has been significant, Thakmore admitted reluctantly. Our soldiers report seeing dead humans walking among the living, providing tactical guidance and warnings. Our most advanced scanning equipment detects nothing during these manifestations, Yet the tactical advantages they provide to human forces are undeniable. The admission from their enemy sent another wave of shocked murmurs through the assembly. If even the hegemony was acknowledging the existence of these anomalies, the situation was far more serious than anyone had imagined. Dr. Velnira of the Centaurian Research Institute activated her hovering display platform and projected a series of complex mathematical equations. Her blue-scaled form rippled with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep concentration. "We have analyzed over 300 hours of battlefield recordings from Valheim," she announced. "The tactical improvements shown by human forces during these manifestations exceed anything we have observed in galactic military history. Human units are achieving victory ratios of up to 15-1 against superior forces." The statistics were staggering. In conventional warfare, such odds were simply impossible without overwhelming technological superiority. Yet the humans were achieving these results with equipment that was considered barely adequate by galactic standards. More disturbing, Dr. Velnira continued, is that these phenomena seem to be spreading. We have now confirmed similar reports from human military units in 7 different star systems. The manifestations are not limited to Valheim. This revelation caused several delegates to rise from their seats in alarm. If the phenomena were spreading across multiple theaters of war, the implications were far beyond a single planet's strategic importance. Commander Zilth of the Aquarian Collective extended sensory tendrils from his biopod to taste the chemical composition of the chamber atmosphere. His species communicated primarily through pheromone releases, but the translation matrix converted his biochemical expressions into audible language. The Aquarian Collective has monitored electromagnetic and psionic emanations from human battlefields, Zilth announced. "We detect massive spikes in psychic energy during these manifestations, but the patterns are unlike anything in our databases. They do not match any known form of telepathy or mental projection." The Aquarians were among the most psychically sensitive species in the galaxy, capable of detecting thoughts and emotions across vast distances. If they were unable to identify the source of these energetic disturbances, the mystery was even deeper than anyone had suspected. Ambassador Chun had been listening to the presentations with growing amazement and mounting concern. The ghost protocols were working far beyond their intended purpose, manifesting effects that Earth scientists had never predicted or designed. She requested permission to address the assembly. "Honored delegates," Chun began, "humanity is as surprised by these developments as you are. The ghost protocols were designed as simple communication and morale systems. We had no expectation of the phenomena you have described." "Then, you admit these manifestations are beyond human technology?" asked Keth Moore, his mental voice sharp with accusation. Chun paused, choosing her words carefully. "We admit that we do not fully understand what is happening on our battlefields. However, I can assure you that humanity has not developed any technology capable of creating the effects you have documented." "Then, how do you explain the tactical advantages your forces are achieving?" demanded Admiral Vexhai. "We don't explain them," Chun replied honestly. "We simply accept them and continue fighting for our survival." This admission created an uncomfortable silence in the chamber. If humanity wasn't responsible for the phenomena, then what was? The implications suggested forces at work that were beyond the comprehension of any known science. Dr. Velnira activated another display showing energy readings from human battlefields. These measurements indicate massive releases of a form of energy that does not match any entry in our scientific databases. The energy appears to be psychic in nature, but operates according to principles we cannot identify. Could this be some form of previously unknown natural phenomenon? Suggested the Veltar representative. Unlikely, Yulseth responded. The energy manifestations are directly correlated with human emotional states, particularly feelings of loss, determination, and what humans term honor. The stronger these emotions, the more pronounced the phenomena become. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to form a picture that none of the assembled aliens wanted to acknowledge. The manifestations were linked to human psychology and emotion in ways that suggested consciousness could somehow persist beyond biological death. Such a concept challenged fundamental beliefs about the nature of existence that had been held by galactic civilization for thousands of years. General Thakmore spoke again, his voice heavy with a reluctance that came from admitting the impossible. My intelligence reports indicate that human forces consistently receive tactical information that they should have no way of obtaining. They know about troop movements that have not yet been decided, weapon placements that were classified, and strategic plans that exist only in our highest security databases. Are you suggesting that dead humans are somehow accessing classified hegemony intelligence? Asked Kethmore incredulously. I am suggesting, Thakmore replied grimly, that we are facing something far beyond conventional warfare. My soldiers are beginning to report that they feel watched during every engagement, as if invisible eyes are observing their every move. Equipment failures are becoming commonplace, always at moments that provide maximum advantage to human forces. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They were dealing with a phenomenon that operated outside the known laws of physics, provided impossible tactical advantages, and seemed to be spreading throughout human military forces across the galaxy. Ambassador Chun stood once again, her expression grave. Whatever is happening on our battlefields, I can promise you this. Humanity will continue to fight for our survival and the survival of our allies. If that fight has awakened something that others consider impossible or supernatural, then so be it. We will use every advantage we possess to defend what we hold dear. The session ended without resolution, but with a growing understanding that the war against the hegemony had become something far more complex than anyone had anticipated. The galaxy was being forced to confront the possibility that consciousness, determination, and love might be forces as powerful as any weapon or technology. In the depths of space, more human soldiers were dying in battles across a dozen worlds. And with each death, the phenomena grew stronger, spreading through the ranks like a ghostly contagion that carried within it the promise that no sacrifice would ever be forgotten, no fallen comrade would ever truly be alone. The ghosts of Valheim were no longer just a human concern. They had become a galactic mystery that challenged everything the civilized species thought they knew about life, death, and the power of the human spirit.